Hello and welcome to the third entry in our class guide series for Gloomhaven 2nd edition. I am Emerging Boat, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Savas Cragheart. I've played the Cragheart up through level 7 of the playthrough of the game that I'm doing on YouTube. I also played the Cragheart in 1st edition and some in Gloomhaven Digital. And I have other Haven game experience, so I haven't played with all of the cards with Cragheart, but I do have enough recent experience that I can tell you about the cards that I have played, the strengths of those, some of the things that I found maybe a little awkward. And then even for the cards that I haven't played, hopefully I can give you some valuable insight into them for if you want to pick those cards for your playthrough. The way this video is going to be structured is that we are going to do a brief overview of the class, talking about just what does the Cragheart do in general, what is it good at, what is it not good at, what are the types of builds that you can go for, maybe some things to keep in mind for party composition. Then after that, we're going to jump into talking about every single one of the cards. We're going to start at level 1, then we're going to go through level X, and then go through all of the level up choices, and I will talk to you about why I might choose a specific card at each level up. And then after that, we're going to talk about perks. Then we'll talk about Masteries. Then we will talk about the solo scenario item. And then finally, I'll wrap it all up with some final thoughts. So let's just get on into it. The Savas Cragheart is rated as a 2 out of 5 on the complexity scale. It has a 3 out of 5 for melee, a 3 out of 5 for range, a 1 out of 5 for mobility, a 3 out of 5 for support, a 3 out of 5 for defense, and a 4 out of 5 for control. And it has an earth elemental affinity. So just from looking at these stats, you can kind of see that the Cragheart is a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. But do not let that fool you into thinking that you are just going to be playing like okay because you're not going to be great at anything. You have very high potential for damage output. You can also just completely change how a scenario goes based on your ability to control. Now, for the Mind Thief, when we talked about that class, the Mind Thief was literally about controlling enemies and being able to have them attack each other, have them being able to move. For the Cragheart, it's a different type of control because you're going to be doing this through obstacles and forcing enemies to have to go certain ways based off of how you are placing obstacles. But we'll talk about that shortly. The Cragheart is just in general a very, very versatile class. Now let's take a look at the flip side of this board. And here we can see that we are an 11 card class and we have a high health pool. One of the things that 11 card hand size should tell you is that you should feel more open to being able to play lost cards, especially earlier in a scenario. You don't want to be playing multiple lost cards early, but you could think about playing one or two, like one lost card maybe within your first rest cycle is not going to hinder your endurance. And you do get some very strong loss cards. Like even for an 11 card hand size, I do think some of your losses are pretty powerful. This side of the class board and the other side talk about your low mobility, as a 1 out of 5 on the reverse side. That is because of a combination of you don't have a ton of big moves and you generally have slower initiative cards. Like when we start taking a look at the cards, you are going to be a little disappointed if you're coming from other classes, like especially if you've played the Silent Knife, for instance, where you have just amazingly great initiative cards like left and right. The Cragheart is a little bit more limited, and I think that is kind of the biggest reason why it gets a 1 out of 5 for mobility, because honestly, you do get some decent moves. You have a few move 3s and move 4s, which aren't huge, but they're good enough for what you need to be doing. Though I will say that I say that from the perspective of somebody who played more of a ranged build for Cragheart, not so much of a melee build. And I think as you get into playing the Cragheart, that's what you're going to really be. Your two builds are really going to be, how do you want to be attacking? Do you want to be ranged or melee? And that's kind of boring to say. It's just the kind of build versatility here, but those are kind of like the main choices you're going to have. Early on in your career, you are going to be doing a lot of different things. Like you're probably going to be doing a mix of ranged and melee and healing and creating obstacles. But I think as you start to level up, you are going to be just pivoting more into focusing on the melee attacks or more on the ranged attacks. But you are also, all Craghearts are going to be generating more and more obstacles. Both the ranged and the melee are going to get abilities that benefit from having obstacles around. You don't have a ton of obstacle generation early on, and I think that's good because you need to really be comfortable with understanding how monsters are going to behave before you can start intelligently placing obstacles. Placing obstacles well is like one of the key factors to learning how to play the Cragheart well. Because doing a good job of that means that you can funnel enemies to you and pace them out rather than opening a room and just having all enemies come at you all at once. By being able to place obstacles in good positions, you can have those enemies come to you in small groups so that you can just take them out very consistently and quickly. You're also going to be able to just like negate some damage because you're just going to prevent enemies from being able to attack you for multiple rounds. You may even be able to force enemies to have to walk through hazardous terrain or traps or something that is just going to, like, things that they would normally try to avoid to do. You can use your obstacles to make them do those things because enemies are not that smart with their movement. You can outsmart them by just knowing the rules for how they're going to behave and being able to manipulate them with that obstacle creation. The catch to this is that you also need to be aware of what your party wants to be doing because you don't want to prevent your melee party members from being able to do the things that they want to do. Creating choke points for the enemies is great until you start creating those choke points in a way that half of your party can't do anything because they're melee and they just can't get into range because you have obstacles in the way. So, like I said, early on, you're not going to have that much access to being able to create obstacles, but as you level up, you can start creating a ton of obstacles, and you need to be aware of when it is good to create obstacles and when it is not good. And you need to be able to give value and make sure you have the right weight on abilities that destroy obstacles, because you do want to clear those obstacles out in some cases to be able to make room and have your party move through a room that you had previously cluttered up. You want to make way to make things easier for them so they don't have to have like huge movements just to be able to get through the mess that you made. The character board also notes this, but keep in mind that you cannot just close off a section of the map entirely because that would just lead to like the cheesiest of strategies. So that's the only thing you really need to keep in mind when you're creating those obstacles. Well, no, not the only thing. One of the things that you need to keep in mind, in addition to all the things I just talked about. The last thing I'll note for the overview before we start getting into each of the cards is that you are going to have some abilities that have some really cool AoE effects, both in terms of damage output and in terms of just being able to get, like, you know, there's one card I'm thinking of in particular, being able to get muddle on a bunch of enemies. You will have abilities that can help you to like turn the entire tide of a room. And I have multiple scenarios in mind where I'm thinking about how the Cragheart alone with just like one, well, maybe not alone, maybe a little bit with some help from Satha too, but the Cragheart just completely made that room almost entirely trivial because of like playing one of its lost cards. Some of those are dependent on having obstacles in place. Some of those also just benefit from if you can use obstacles to try to manipulate people into a certain formation, you can get even more use out of those lost cards. But the Cragheart is just overall so good, powerful, versatile, great class. But let's get into looking at every one of those cards. The way I'm going to do this, as I do in all my class guide videos, is that I'm going to be ordering these cards in order of initiative, just because that's the way I like to organize my hand. I also think it gives a good sense of thinking about the types of initiatives that we're expecting to see at each level, and especially in the starting hand cards. Gives you a good sense of like what initiative values that you expect to be seeing, because spoilers for the Cragheart, they are not going to be super low. But we're going to start off with level 1, then go to level X, and then look at each of the level up choices. So let's go to our first level 1 card. And that is Unstable Upheaval. The top action is a loss that gives you 1 experience. It says attack 3, targeting all adjacent enemies, and then if you consume Earth, you can target all enemies up to 2 hexes away instead. This also gives you another experience. And then if all adjacent allies suffer 2 damage. For some reason, I really struggled saying that. The bottom action is a move 3, and this is at initiative 13. But Emerging Boat, I thought you said the initiatives were not great for the Cragheart. This is initiative 13. That's pretty dang good. Guess what, bucko? This is the best initiative card that you have in the entire class. Yes, the entire class. There is nothing better than initiative 13 for the Cragheart. You will get some cards that are close, like there is, I think, a 17 is the next closest. But yeah, the Cragheart does not have great initiative overall. So this card alone for its initiative value is good to keep in your hand for a while. I don't remember exactly how long it stayed in my hand for, maybe up through level 5. I'd have to go back and double check. But just the initiative by itself is great. A move 3 is good for the Cragheart. It's not outstanding. You will have some move 4s, but a fast initiative move 3 is very good, so that you can pair it with a strong top ability action. And then the top action on this, that loss action, is also really good. You are very happy to be keeping this card in your hand for, the first room, 2 rooms, and then just popping this loss action. Because it is very easy to target 4, maybe 5 enemies. Like if you are in a party of 4, you could be attacking like up to 6 enemies with this. It's not unheard of. Even if we say that you're only attacking 4 enemies, that's still an attack 12 loss. That's really good for a level 1 card, especially for a class that has 11 cards in their hand. And so that, weaker initiative is one of the things that they use to try to balance out the Cragheart a bit. So you do have powerful effects, but talking about this card in particular, this is just a fantastic card overall. I would keep this in my hand for a while for both melee and ranged builds. Our next card is Earthen Clod. The top action is an attack 2 at range 5, and if you consume Earth, then you get to immobilize and gain an experience. The bottom action is an attack 3 at range 5, and then add +1 attack for each obstacle or objective adjacent to the target. This gives you 2 experience, and this is all at initiative 29. You can already see the jump in initiative here. I know I'm going to keep harping on it, but it is important to talk about. Going from 13 is our best initiative card at level 1 and overall, to our next best initiative being 29. Yeah, you do have some, not just slow cards, but just some like middling initiative cards, which isn't great. So 29 for your class is still pretty good. An attack 2 is not, something you're going to write home about. It's kind of a low attack value, but you really want to be using this with, being able to consume Earth so that you can do that immobilize and potentially just prevent an enemy from attacking you. So it's a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense. You really like that in a card, especially for someone who may potentially be a bit of a tank. You do have an ability to be a front lines character with the Cragheart. The bottom loss is fine, especially at lower levels. You're not going to have a ton of obstacles that you're going to be placing around. So it may be hard to get to this, it's going to be hard to get this beyond an attack 5 early on, but it is a bottom attack action, so it's still going to be more powerful because you compare this obviously with another powerful top attack action. And at that point, you're just doing a good amount of damage in the round. But this loss is nowhere near as powerful as the loss action from our last card. One card that we will get to in a little bit that is pretty key for the ranged build is the card Backup Ammunition, which allows you to add an extra target to your next 4 single target ranged attacks. So keep that in mind with some of these ranged attack abilities, because they could be things where you might want to use it creatively with Backup Ammunition, because this could turn into an attack 2 range 5 immobilized targeting 2 enemies, which is really nice. But even if you're going for a melee build, I could see you keeping this card in your hand, if only for its initiative, and trying to do the bottom as a basic move too. It's just a solid card for initiative until you can get some slightly better initiatives at some of the early level ups. Next up, we have Crushing Grasp. The top action is an attack 4 immobilize, infuse Earth melee attack. You do get 1 experience for doing this. The bottom action is create 1 hex obstacle tile in an adjacent empty hex. All allies and enemies adjacent to the created tile suffer 1 damage, and then you could do a loot 1 and infuse Earth, and this is all at initiative 35. If you're going for the melee build, obviously that top action for the attack 4 and immobilize, a non-loss, that's a very solid staple attack action that you can do. If you really want to benefit from that immobilize, you may end up wanting to just pair it with an earlier move. You may be pairing this with the move from Unstable Upheaval, just to maybe you are already adjacent to an enemy, you attack, and then you immobilize them, then you move slightly away, preventing them from being able to attack you. Maybe you're using this to attack an enemy who's ranged, and you're just trying to use that immobilize to prevent them from moving away from you. But then there's also times where you're probably just not even caring about the immobilize that much, and you're just trying to do it for that attack, and that's okay too. That bottom action is the first ability that we have where we get to create obstacles at will. It is just creating 1 adjacent to you. We will get some abilities later on that give you a much more freedom in terms of where you can place those obstacles. But this bottom action is just a very, very nice setup card for some of the some of your other actions that you might need to have an obstacle adjacent to you. Namely for the ranged build where you could benefit from having an obstacle adjacent to you and you could benefit from having Earth. This bottom action is giving you a nice setup for both of those things for the following turn. The loot one, I didn't get that much value out of, I don't think, because I used usually using this earlier in a round or earlier in a room where there wasn't much loot yet, so that I could create an obstacle adjacent to me and then the next round, like, throw it or something. So, I don't know. The loot to me on this one is a little forgettable, but overall, this is an excellent card. Both halves of it are great for both builds, or it has a half that is good for each build. And both halves infuse Earth, which is awesome. We love a good, strong Earth infuser, so I expect this to stay in your hand for quite a while. Next is Rumbling Advance. The top action is a heal 4 at range 2, infuse Earth. The bottom action is a move 2, and then all adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage, and you also infuse Earth with this. And this is at initiative 38. This is another nice card in terms of just having a card that has 2 sides that both infuse Earth, so this is a nice setup card. And it's a card that just gives you some versatility, because now you have the ability to do a heal 4. Like, a heal 4 at level 1 is very good. It is only range 2, so you do have to be somewhat close to your ally, but if you're in melee, you may just be using this heal on yourself. If you're in range, you're usually keeping your enemies around range 3, so your allies are generally going to be around range 2, so I don't think the range is too much of a limiting factor on this. I think range 2 is fine. And then that bottom action with move 2, adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage. That's really good if you're trying to take out some high shielded enemies, especially at earlier levels where those high shield enemies have very low health. Just doing 1 damage to them could be half their health or a third of their health. So this is a very good card. I think how long this stays in your hand is going to vary from how long you want to stay as somewhat of a support role, because that heal 4 is going to be good for a while. But as you start to level up, you may just kind of be getting out of that support mode and be trying to just be more focused on damage. So in those cases, I could see this card coming out of your hand, but especially at level 1, I think this is a really nice card to have for its versatility. Next up is Earthen Bulwark. The top action says create 2 1-hex obstacle tiles in empty hexes within range 3, and then if you consume Earth, all allies adjacent to at least 1 created tile suffer 1 damage and gain ward, and you gain an experience. The bottom action is move 2 and then heal 1 at range 2, and this is at initiative 41. This is our second card that we get to just create obstacles, and it's the first one we're actually creating obstacles at range, which is very powerful. This is when you can really start to get into some of that enemy path manipulation, because you can start blocking off certain paths and limiting how many enemies are starting to come up towards you, forcing enemies to walk through traps, all that stuff. Additionally, it can allow you to give your allies ward. You do have to have them suffer 1 damage to get that ward, but that's fine because ward is always going to prevent at least 1 damage. So at worst, it's a wash and it doesn't really do anything for you. It's just you're kind of loaning a health point. But as you go up in difficulty, this becomes more and more valuable because you're more likely to get more damage mitigation out of that ward than just 1 damage. Now, bottom action, while a heal 1 isn't great, when you see a heal 1, you just kind of think of it like a tool for being able to remove things like poison or wound, especially poison where, that heal is only going to go towards clearing that poison. That's when it's the most satisfying to use a heal 1, because you're like, I used this exactly for when I needed it. It's just, you kind of look at this like a free heal. It's a move that you're looking to pair with a better top attack. The 41 initiative isn't great. You're not going to be using this card and being excited to be able to use it for its quote-unquote early initiative and a move like you would be with Unstable Upheaval. But getting a free heal 1 is very nice. This could also be something that you pair with another top heal, like your Rumbling Advance, for instance, where you're using that bottom movement to be able to move up, clear a poison off an ally or yourself, and then use that top heal to really just get an actual good amount of healing on an ally that was otherwise at risk of dying. So, admittedly, I may have underused this card. I don't think I really used this card much, if at all, in my early Cragheart career. Whether right or wrong, I think the way that I looked at it was that I didn't see the 2 1-hexed obstacles as being worthy of a top action. Like, you could use this as you're going into a room and then use that to try to manipulate some enemy paths, but 2 obstacles is not, it may not be enough of a preventative measure for being able to mitigate enemy damage. There is another level up card that we'll see later, which has a similar top action and gives you a 3rd obstacle, as well as some other things. And I think that was enough of a separator for me to start really leaning into, yes, a top action is worth that obstacle creation. But personally, I just didn't have enough effects at an early level where I was really that interested in generating obstacles, because I didn't have a lot of abilities that were going to like benefit from having those obstacles around. I know I just said the same thing multiple times. I have a tendency to do that, but that's what I do when I'm just losing my train of thought. I will say the caveat to this is that this could be a good setup card for another level X card that we'll talk about later, Heaving Swing, because this could give you the ability to put some obstacles into a place where you can later push an enemy into them and get some more damage out of it. So your mileage may vary with this one. I do think it's a good card. I just didn't always use it. It was an earlier cut for me. Next is Opposing Strike. The top action is an attack 3, and if you infuse or consume Earth, then you get +1 attack and muddle and an experience. And this is a multi-target attack where you can attack enemies on opposite sides of you, hence the name Opposing Strike. The bottom action is a persistent loss with 5 charges that says at the end of this and your next 4 turns, perform heal 2, range 3, and you'll get 3 experience over the course of this action, and this is all at initiative 46. For the melee-focused Cragheart, this is an awesome card. This is potentially an attack 8 if you're using it at its ceiling, along with getting Muddled to give you some of that defensive capability to reduce the amount of damage that you're going to be taking as a melee Cragheart. Just a fantastic action overall. Then that bottom action, I think, is very good for the melee Cragheart, and it's a little bit more situational for the ranged Cragheart, but it's, especially at earlier levels when you're probably doing a little bit more of your versatile actions where you may be leaning a little bit more into healing, then this can be an excellent action. It's essentially 10 healing spread out over the course of 5 turns, which I think in more cases than not, spreading that healing out can be really good, because if you're dealing with enemies that have poison or wound, then you're consistently clearing off those negative conditions. Albeit with the poison, you're only removing the poison. So it's, you know, you're kind of losing some of that value from the healing, but it's just free healing at that point. For one action that you're spending on 1 turn, you're getting some value for the next 5 turns. That's really good. It's a really nice loss. And there were situations where I used this where even early in a scenario, I think, it really changed the tide of how I was playing with other characters, because I felt I could be more aggressive with them, knowing that I was going to get healing from my Cragheart. So for the melee build, this card is probably going to stay in your hand for quite some time. For the ranged card, or for the ranged build, this will probably be a little bit more of a potential early cut. Although I think it is just one of those cards that kind of sits in your sideboard of, you know, thinking like, well, what type of enemies am I seeing? Do I see a lot of enemies with wound? If yes, then this card can really be worth taking and playing as a potentially early-ish loss. Next, we have Crater. The top action is an attack 3 at range 3, and if you consume Earth, then you get push 2 and 1 experience. The bottom action is a lot of text that says, first, all adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage, then move forward with jump. Then all adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage, and then if you consume Earth, then you get to add 1 damage to that and gain an experience. So you have the potential to gain 2 experience on this action overall. Like I said, it is a loss. I think I said that. And it is at initiative 61. The top action is going to be a staple card for the ranged Cragheart for quite some time. An attack 3 at range 3 is nice. Being able to get that push 2 is excellent, because there's a very good chance that you can push an enemy into a trap. So you're able to deal more damage to that enemy. Maybe you're even pushing that enemy out of a position where it can actually even come up and attack one of your allies or attack you. Crater is just an excellent top action. I had this in my hand for a long time, and even when I cut it from my hand as my ranged Cragheart, I still kept it in my sideboard as like potentially I bring it in if I know there's going to be a lot of traps in the scenario. The bottom loss is interesting just because there's a few ways you can use it. You know, the move forward jump, I think, has its own merits of just like there are going to be some scenarios where you need to be having a lot of movement, and this loss is just going to be something that is very helpful for you to just have movement in general. Although there is another level X loss movement card that's better than this if you're just looking for movement. But the direct damage that you can do from this, you can do potentially 3 direct damage. Like you could choose not to actually move anywhere new for the bottom of this card, and essentially just deal 3 direct damage to adjacent enemies. At low levels, that could be enough to kill some flame demons. I forget how much health they have. I think they have like 3. Yeah. Level 1 elites have 3 health, normal have 2, level 2 and 3. Yeah, so you could potentially be killing some, excuse me, some high shield enemies off the bat with the bottom loss card. If you can do that to like, if you can use that to kill 2 flame demons, I think playing this for that alone is worth it. But that being said, it is a situational loss. Like if you're taking this card, you're generally taking it because you really want that top attack with the push. The melee Cragheart, maybe you have this in your hand for the first few levels because you're just looking for a little bit of versatility with some of your attack actions. Maybe you want 1 or 2 ranged attacks. But if you're the melee build, I don't see you keeping this card in your hand for a long time just because of that bottom loss. Like it's fine situationally, but it's not going to be something that's like carrying you or defining you by any means. Next up, we have Avalanche. The top action for this is a loss action. It gives you 1 experience, and if you consume Earth, you'll get a 2nd experience, but is an attack 4, and if you consume Earth, you get +2 attack, so it can be an attack 6, targeting 2 enemies that are adjacent to each other. The bottom action is a heal 2 at range 3. If you consume Earth, you can do this at range 5, and this is at initiative 75. This is a nice card. The melee, at early levels, any Cragheart is going to love playing this top action at some point as a nice loss. An attack 6, it potentially comes up to an attack 12, is a great loss action. It still doesn't beat the loss action on Unstable Upheaval, which is just a phenomenal loss action, but it's still very good because it can still be an attack 12. And that bottom action is nice. There's going to be a number of turns where you don't really care to be moving as a Cragheart, both as ranged and as melee, and so if you can just get a nice little heal 2 out of it, sure, that's great. I don't think I ever really used that Earth consumption on the bottom of this card to make this a range 5 heal. It's nice that it's there as an option, but I think for the most part, the range 3 on this is going to be more than good enough. Because if you're the melee Cragheart, you're probably using this on yourself. If you're the ranged Cragheart, then you're generally keeping the enemies maybe around range 3, especially at earlier levels, where that's like where your attacks normally live, are range 3 attacks. So your allies are probably going to be range 2, maybe range 3. And so yeah, you don't really need the Earth consumption for the extra range on this, but it is nice if you need to have it. So overall, a nice card. I think that this could easily be a candidate for cutting a card. Once you start to get some more interesting bottom actions, if you find that you don't need to be doing as much healing, then you're probably not keeping this in your hand just for the attack alone. But at early levels, I do think this is a very nice card to have around. Next, we have Backup Ammunition, which is the card that I mentioned earlier for the ranged Craghearts. This is a persistent loss that has 4 charges, and it says on your next 4 single-targeted ranged attack abilities, add +1 target. You can get 2 experience over the course of this action. And then the bottom action is a move 3, and this is at initiative 77. Melee Craghearts probably won't be keeping this around. Maybe at early levels when you're dipping into both ranged and melee, you keep this just so you can kind of like pop it towards the end, or maybe it's just you pop it early, and then that way when you are doing a ranged attack, you're just doubling the effectiveness of it. But for ranged Craghearts, this is an ability you would love to use. I mean, you could easily use this early on in a scenario and just get a lot of extra early damage, or maybe you save it for like the middle of a scenario. You do want to be making sure that you're using it at a time where you can get all the charges out of it, but it's not going to be hard to get all the charges out of it. I'll bring Earthen Clod back up here because, you know, like I mentioned before, this could be a nice action to be able to like double the effectiveness of having like immobilizing 2 enemies at range 5. Alternatively, this is a nice way of doubling the effectiveness of that loss action at the bottom, because that loss action by itself isn't phenomenal, but if you're able to do, you know, target 2 different enemies, maybe they're each adjacent to an obstacle, and you can do 2 attack 4s at range 5, that's really good. It just makes that loss a bit more interesting. You do have, for your range attacks, are generally something like attack 3s. So even if you're just using this to just double the top attack actions of some of your cards that are attack 3s, this is going to be equal to like 12 damage over the course of this card, which is very good. You sometimes want some of that extended additional damage as opposed to like some of that burst damage that we can get from some of the other lost cards that we saw where you're dealing a bunch of damage to a bunch of enemies all in one round. Sometimes it's nice to have the flexibility for something like backup ammunition where you can spread that damage out a little bit more. It does take a while to get to, like, you don't really get a lot of single target range attacks for your level ups, but at level 5 you do get a nice beefy attack. If you consume Earth, you can make it an attack 5, so it's a bit of a spoiler, but that's another one that is great to double up with backup ammunition. So anyway, backup ammunition is a great card. Ranged Craghearts are probably going to keep this in their hand, maybe for their lifetime, although I could see an argument too for if you just end up cutting this at a certain point where you're like, I'm not really getting the value out of it. I think I'd still keep it almost every time. I'm trying to think of how many scenarios I didn't bring it into. But yeah, for the melee Cragheart, not that important. Next we have Dirt Tornado. The top action is an attack 1 at range 2 muddle, targeting 6 enemies in a, I guess, a single target with range 1 around that central point. Flower, honeycomb shape, I guess, how do you want to call it? But if you consume Earth, you can make this an attack 2, targeting all those enemies, and you get an experience. The downside is that you also muddle all allies in the red hexes of the attack ability. The bottom action of this is a move 3, and this is at initiative 82. This top attack, yeah, it can be nice for trying to get a lot of damage out. Like you have, if you really hit the ceiling of this card, then you could potentially be doing an attack 14. Although I don't think I have ever used this for the ceiling where I've targeted an enemy in every one of those hexes. Usually it's maybe like anywhere from 2 to 4 enemies in those hexes, which if you're consuming that Earth is anywhere from 4 to 8 damage, which is awesome for a non-loss card. But I think you can also just look at this card as a tool for being able to get muddle on a lot of enemies. Like this can be a great room opener ability where you're not sure what to expect in a room, you kind of step in and then you're able to muddle a bunch of enemies, whether it's you that is expecting to take some of those attacks or an ally that's going to be moving in a little bit further. Being able to do a mass muddle is really nice. And yes, it is technically only range 2, but you just have to have one of those hexes in that range, so you can be attacking enemies up to range 4 from this. The other reason it can be nice as a room opener is that you're less likely to have allies in those red hexes as well, so you're not going to be muddling your friends for that next round. So yeah, early on, I think I used this as both a damage dealer and as a muddler, but then as I started to level up and I started to get other cards where I really wanted to prioritize using Earth for those cards, I just kind of kept this card around as like a way to muddle a bunch of enemies. It did eventually come out of my hand, I think, or maybe kept as kind of a sideboard card, depending on party size, because if you're in a smaller party, this is not going to be as impressive as a card. If you're in a party of 4, this is going to be a very impressive card. And then that bottom is just another move 3. We've had a few move 3s at this point, so nothing special, but it is also just nice to have some simple actions. Next we have Massive Boulder. The top action is an attack 3 at range 2, and the effect says all allies and enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage, and then you infuse Earth. The bottom action is a move 4, and this is at initiative 87. So these last few cards have been slow initiative, at least slow enough that you can also reliably go after enemies as well. Some of those cards that we were looking at earlier where we were kind of in the middling initiatives are just, I don't know, it's tough because with Cragheart, some of those middling initiatives, especially at earlier levels, are what you kind of consider to be your fast initiatives. But I also do like having these late initiative cards where you are confident that you're going to be going after almost all enemies. This top action is going to be a staple action for ranged Craghearts because it's a nice attack 3. You will probably want to be spending an enhancement to make that a attack 3 at range 3 because range 2 is very limiting. Making it a range 3 does give you a lot more value out of it. It also just brings it up to par with a lot of our other range attacks that are at least range 3. But the best things about this are, one, it's our attack that infuses Earth, so it's kind of similar to, Crushing Grasp from the melee build, which has that attack action as an Earth infuser, so you're doing some damage and you're setting up for the next round where you can do, one of your other attacks that needs Earth to really power it up. We finally see that for the ranged build with Massive Boulder. But then you also have that ability for all allies and enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage. Okay, we're willing to hurt our friends for this because for shielded enemies, this can be an incredible value, especially when you combine it with backup ammunition, where you could be getting, if you have one shielded enemy who's surrounded by other enemies, you can throw a couple of massive boulders at those friends that are surrounding that shielded enemy, get 2 direct damage off on that shielded enemy. Bada bing, bada boom, maybe you've killed a high shield enemy, maybe you've just done like half its health. Either way, you should look for ways that you can bypass shield and get value out of these effects that allow you to do direct damage, because the fact that you're hurting your friends is just a minor inconvenience. We have healing. We can help them out if they really need it. But the extra damage that we can do to enemies is worth it. Again, especially as you have larger parties. Like if you were in a 4-character party with the Cragheart, you can be dealing that splash damage to a number of enemies. Like if they're grouped up in a way that they would be clustered for something like Dirt Tornado, maybe you're actually looking at that as a good opportunity to use Massive Boulder paired with oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the card name? Paired with backup ammunition so that you can get a bunch of splash damage in there. So Massive Boulder, fantastic action for the ranged Cragheart. And then that bottom move 4, that is the best move ability that we have at level 1. A non-loss move 4 is excellent, especially for a class that does not have a lot of great movement. This is going to be something that the melee Cragheart is probably taking just to have a consistent source of high movement. And good moves are excellent on quote-unquote strong initiative cards, where you either have very fast initiative or very slow initiative, where you can confidently say I'm going before or after enemies, because it allows you to just take a powerful top action and then decide, okay, I know I'm going to be able to get in position with a movement card. Do I want to go before or after enemies? So something like this could be a card that the melee Cragheart plays in the first round of many scenarios, where that first round you're waiting for enemies to close in a little bit towards you before you start to move in. So that move 4 can get you into the positioning that you want for the following rounds, and then you can start laying out some damage. So excellent card that I think stays in your hand for most builds for a little while, but especially the range build. This is going to stick around for quite some time. Our first X card, Petrify. The top action is a loss. It is an attack 4 at range 3 in a triangle formation. It says for each target killed, gain 1 experience and create 1 hex obstacle tile in the featureless hex they occupied. You infuse Earth and you get 1 experience by default with this. The bottom action is an attack 2 at range 2, and if you consume Earth, you can make this an attack 2 at range 4 and you get an experience, and this is at initiative 53. I will say I underused this card. I think at earlier levels I probably should have used it a bit more as a ranged Cragheart, because I do think it can be useful. I think that the thing that makes it tough is that attack 2 at range 2 it can be very limiting for the ranged Cragheart. Yes, you can consume Earth to make it an attack 2 at range 4. However, you probably have better top actions that you're probably trying to use that Earth for. It could be something where if you're in a good spot, you can maybe pair, if you already have Earth, maybe you're using this in combination with the top of Massive Boulder, where you're consuming Earth to get that extra range out of the bottom of Petrify, and then you're using the top of Massive Boulder to reinfuse Earth for the next round. That could be a good combination. But personally, what I found is just that for the bottom actions of my cards, I was generally looking to do other things like healing or using that Earth for other things. I don't know, like I said, potentially underused. The top action is a nice card. You could potentially get up to 4 experience with that, which is pretty interesting, but it's very unlikely you're going to be killing 3 enemies with that. Even in a party of 4, it can be a little tough to actually get 3 enemies in that, so more than likely this is going to be an attack 8, which is not quite to the bar that we've seen from some other lost cards for Cragheart. So I don't know, I can definitely see an argument that I underuse this and I'm undervaluing it, but I just didn't think it was exciting enough to put into my hand and cut some other cards. But it's also worth keeping as a side card, especially for cases where there's not going to be a lot of movement in some scenarios, where you're going to be a little bit more stationary and you are more interested in having some bottom attack from Petrify. Melee focus build, probably just totally ignoring this card. ranged build. Try it out, see how you like it, but I don't think it's like a critical card. Heaving Swing is our next level X card. This is an attack 3 push 1 that says you may push the target into hexes containing obstacles. In each case, destroy the obstacle, the target suffers 2 damage, and you gain 1 experience. The bottom action says destroy an adjacent obstacle or suffer 1 damage to add +3 to your next melee attack this round, and this is at initiative 57. If you are the melee build, you should absolutely take Heaving Swing. This is a card where we can see high payoff for having obstacles, whether it's obstacles that you created or they're just obstacles that are in the scenario. You want to start getting familiar with those mechanics of like trying to not just use obstacles for enemy manipulation, but also trying to figure out how you can like use them for enemy manipulation, path manipulation, and then benefit from them later on. And this gives you an ability to destroy some of those obstacles, which early on may seem like not that important, but as you start creating more and more obstacles, you want ways to be able to destroy obstacles. And this is a nice tool for being able to do that. We talked about that +1 range on Massive Boulder being really good as a first enhancement for the ranged Cragheart. This, adding a +1 push to Heaving Swing is a great first enhancement for the melee Cragheart because, I mean, extra push is always nice. You have a higher chance of being able to push an enemy into a trap, but also you can push, have a chance to push an enemy into an additional obstacle, which gives you another experience, gives that target 2 more damage. It's just a very solid upgrade on what is probably going to be a staple action for you for quite some time. But that bottom action is also something that's very powerful as well. It is amazing that you have that flexibility of saying to destroy an adjacent obstacle or suffer 1 damage, because suffering 1 damage is not bad. You have a lot of health. It's a little bit more impactful to you as a melee Cragheart because you are going to be taking more attacks, therefore that health is more valuable to you. But adding +3 attack to a melee attack, especially at early levels, could mean the difference between like killing an enemy versus not killing an enemy. Both halves of this card are fantastic for the melee build, and you're probably going to keep this in your hand for a little while. Next up, we have Burrow. This is a top action of heal 2, target 2 at range 3, infuse Earth. The bottom action is a move 7. This is a loss, by the way. It's a move 7, and then if you consume Earth, you get to immobilize all enemies move through with the move ability, and you gain 1 experience. So minimum 1 experience you're getting with this card, maximum of 2 experience, and this is at initiative 94. This is an excellent card, I think, early on for Craghearts early in their career, because it has heal 4, infuse Earth as a top action. It's maybe going to be a little bit more valuable for the ranged Cragheart who might just be looking for something to do between turns or between attacking rounds where you are trying to infuse Earth. Maybe a little bit less valuable for the melee Cragheart. But then having that flexibility of having a potential move 7 jump loss for a card is going to be very important for some scenarios. So for my build, I kept this in my hand for the first few levels. Having that heal, the 2 heal to be able to target multiple allies in a party of 4 was very nice. It's just a great card for support, but then this is going to remain as a potential sideboard option where if you need to be doing a lot of movement in a scenario, you should absolutely be bringing this card because this is an awesome move ability. In those scenarios when you need to be doing a lot of movement, you might also just be trying not to kill enemies or trying to avoid dealing with them, and that immobilize is also something that can be really handy to have. Our first level up is level 2, and our options are starting with Mud Eruption. Top action is a loss that gives you 2 experience. And this is an attack 3, target 4 enemies within 4 hexes, and then push 1. Then create 1 1-hex obstacle tile in the featureless hex each target previously occupied, and you can infuse Earth with this. The bottom action is a move 4, and this is at initiative 25. This is, number 1, a great movement card for the Cragheart. It's a great initiative. If you take this, this would be the second best initiative that you have. And it's a powerful loss action. It doesn't have the same ceiling as the loss from Unstable Upheaval, but it gives you more versatility in that you can just target enemies within 4 hexes, not limited to 2 hexes. Plus having the ability to push and then create some more obstacles, like there are a lot of things that you can use this loss action for to help set up for other actions. And speaking of setup, it does also infuse Earth, which is, again, really nice. A lot of our powerful effects need Earth to really unlock them for those top actions. So there's just a lot that this card is doing on that top action for offensive abilities, as well as preparing for another good round next round. Overall, I think this is an excellent card. It follows a pattern that we like to see in some of these cards with losses on them, where it's a powerful loss action paired with an ability that you want to be repeating. And yes, we do want to be repeating a move forward initiative 25. That is a great combination of things for the Cragheart. Our other option at level 2 is Sentient Growth. The top action is an attack 2 at range 3. You can target 3 enemies in a triangle formation, and then heal 2 all allies in the red hexes of the attack ability, and then you infuse Earth with this. The bottom action is a move 2, heal 1 targeting all in range 1, and then attack 1 targeting all adjacent enemies, and this is at initiative 78. I will say that this card has a lot of versatility associated with it, but I still find it a little awkward, mainly because there's nothing that I love about this card. For that top action, you do need to make sure that at least one enemy is being targeted. You can't just use it to heal allies. So maybe a good use of it is that you're getting like 2 attack 2s and a heal 2, or maybe 1 attack 2 and 2 heal 2s. You know, that's okay. Obviously, that is something where a ranged Cragheart is probably going to want to be doing that. Then the bottom action is just a little awkward to me, because you're doing a move 2, heal 1, and then attacking 1. Like, this is something that I feel like the melee Cragheart is going to want to be using more, mainly for that attack 1. The ranged Cragheart is still going to like get some value out of this, because maybe you're just kind of using it to step up a little bit and then heal your allies while not getting next to enemies. Maybe you're just still staying behind some of your allies. But the melee Cragheart might want to use that. Just, you know, attack 1 is not a lot, but if you're able to target a lot of enemies with that attack 1, you're able to flip a lot of modifier cards. Flipping more modifier cards for you could look like pushing enemies or getting some more element generation out there. Obviously, potentially more damage. On its own, looking at this card, I think it's interesting. But again, there's nothing that I love about it. I just don't think the things are going to scale well with it, because yes, at level 2, doing a couple of attack 2s and a heal 2 is fine, but as you start to level up, it's going to be a little bit less exciting. I think of this card almost as like not a very high ceiling, but a pretty high floor, so that you're just not going to get a whole lot of wide range of outcomes with this card, I would say. But maybe I'm undervaluing it. As for which card to take, I think it's probably pretty obvious based off of how I was talking about these cards, of which one I would pretty much always recommend taking. And that's going to be Mud Eruption, just because a move forward initiative 25 is excellent. There are things that they're making up for some of the deficiencies that we have as a Cragheart, and then that top loss is very powerful. Like, I love everything about that card. It gets me excited. Even as a ranged Cragheart, I still really like that top action. It's still great because it's not technically a ranged attack, they're technically melee attacks, but it's still something that I can effectively do as a ranged Cragheart. Sentient Growth, I can see it being useful. I could see if you are trying to remain as somewhat of a support Cragheart, then absolutely go Sentient Growth. If your party is really depending on you for the healing, then those little heals, while they're not going to be like crazy good, they're awesome for being able to remove poison and wound before being able to set up for other healing abilities. So I would almost always lean towards Mud Eruption unless you are really focused on trying to do some of that support from Sentient Growth. I think what would have made this a more interesting choice is if Sentient Growth had a great initiative on it, like an initiative 10 or something like that. Because Cragheart is a class where I would absolutely consider making a card choice purely because it has awesome initiative. But moving on to level 3, where our first option is Blunt Force, that has a top loss action that gives you an experience of attack 5, and if you consume Earth, you can add another 5 attack to potentially make this an attack 10 gain to experience. The bottom action is move 1 and then heal 2 self, and if you consume Earth, you ward and gain an experience, and this is at initiative 21. If you are a ranged Cragheart, you're probably yawning at this card, but if you're a melee Cragheart, this is very exciting. Move 1, that kind of sucks. It's very little movement, but heal 2 and then get ward on self. If you are a melee Cragheart, you are looking for ways to be able to get some defensive capabilities to be able to mitigate damage. Healing and warding is a great way of doing that. You may pair this with a card like the top of Crushing Grasp, where you are consuming earth in the round and then also reinfusing it for the next round. Or maybe you're trying to do a little bit of balancing of your initiatives. You play a great initiative card like Blunt Force, great relative to the Cragheart, along with the top of Heaving Swing, which has a pretty mediocre initiative. And now you have some nice defensive in the bottom part of your actions there, and then you're getting some nice offensive capabilities from the top of the other card. And again, a great pattern of a very repeatable action with a very powerful loss action. A single target attack 10 is awesome. Like, yes, it is technically slightly below the bar of some of the other attacks, other losses that we've had of like, oh, this could be an attack 12. But the difference is that this is a attack targeting a single enemy, which, you know, it's both things have their use cases where you have attacks that are spreading out damage versus targeting one enemy. We get now some variety in how we're spreading out that damage where we can just target one single enemy. Yes, I could have said that in a way more clear way, but I'm freeballing it right now. I don't know. I didn't prepare my notes before this one. So yeah, attack 10, single target is a great tool to have. This is a phenomenal card for the melee Cragheart. On the other side here, we have Clear the Way. The top action says relocate one adjacent 1-hex obstacle tile to an empty hex within range 4 to perform attack 2, targeting all enemies adjacent to the relocated tile, pierce 1. And if you consume earth, you can add 1 attack to this and gain an experience. The bottom action is a move 3 jump. Destroy all obstacles, hazardous terrain tiles, difficult terrain, and traps in hexes you enter, and this is at initiative 30. While technically not a ranged attack, the top of Clear the Way does give you an ability to do damage at range, but these are all considered still melee attacks. It does effectively give you a similar pattern to the top of Dirt Tornado, where it's like you're targeting a space and then all the hexes around it within range 1. But it's not quite as good because that middle space has to be occupied by the obstacle, so it can't be where an enemy is already standing. So there are some minor limitations in terms of how you are going to be attacking enemies and like the clusters of enemies that you can attack, but it shouldn't be too much of a hindrance. You should still be able to find plenty of ways to be able to throw an obstacle around 2 to 4 enemies. And if you are consuming earth, then you're getting anywhere from 6 to 12 attack, which is awesome for a non-loss ability. This also gives you a great thing to pair with something like the bottom of Crushing Grasp that allows you to create an obstacle and a hex adjacent to you. Now you have something to move that obstacle somewhere else and put it in a way that can maybe block some enemy paths, do some damage, just be more effective than be an obstacle sitting directly next to you. And it has Pierce. I think that's the only source of Pierce that we have on Cragheart in general, so awesome tool to have. And then for that bottom action, we get a move 3 jump. It is great to have a non-loss jump. It's only a move 3, but you can still combine this. It's easy to get boots that give you like a +1 movement. So you can turn this into a move 4 if you needed to. And again, you can destroy all obstacles and hazardous terrain. Like, this is another tool that's just nice to have in your tool belt. There are cases where maybe you don't even really want to be doing those things. In most cases, I was trying to play this for the top action because it is just a great non-loss attack. But there are also cases where, especially at later levels, if you start creating a lot of obstacles, you want to be able to have a way to get rid of them for your allies. This bottom action allows you to do that. It can also be a great thing to just start destroying hazardous terrain or obstacles that are in the scenario to begin with. It's a fun way to change how the scenario is played. In terms of which card to take, I do really like both these cards. If you are a Cragheart that's going to be on the front lines more often, I think Blunt Force is the better choice because you're getting some healing, you're getting some ward, and you have a better initiative there. As the melee Cragheart, it is more important for you to go first because going first is also potentially leading to some damage mitigation. The ranged Cragheart is not going to get as much value out of that small move and heal. So if you're not playing on the front lines, then you're going to take Clear the Way, so that way you have a non-loss AoE damage dealer. But even if you're a melee Cragheart, I can see an argument for why you'd want to take Clear the Way just because of the versatility it gives you. If you have plenty of other melee characters, you may not care as much about having that ward. and so you may value some of the offensive capabilities that you get out of Clear the Way. So yeah, I could see argument for either of these cards. Melee, I lean towards Blunt Force. I can see the argument for Clear the Way. For ranged, I would generally always recommend taking Clear the Way. At level 4, we have our first card, Kinetic Assault. The top action is a move 1 and then attack 4. All allies and enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage. The bottom action is a loss action that persists for the round. It gives you 2 experience, and it says move 3, ward self, and then retaliate 3 at range 3, and this is at initiative 19. Another great card, mainly focused on the melee Cragheart. You love that, great initiative. Again, great is relative. It's hard because we came from some of our other guide videos where we talked about the Silent Knife and the Mind Thief, who have just like single-digit initiative cards. This is still really good for the Cragheart. That top action is awesome. You know, move 1, again, not very big, but we don't have big movements in general. And it's a move 1 on the top action of a card, so that is rare. It could be enhanced with an element infusion there, although, again, for level 4 card, you're going to start getting up in terms of price for those enhancements, and element enhancements are expensive already. But having movement on the top action of a card does give you some ways you can think about using some bottom actions that you would want to use, but you may not be in range to use yet. For example, the bottom of Heaving Swing, where you might want to be powering up an attack. You can now use the bottom of Heaving Swing and still have the ability to reposition yourself to get adjacent to an enemy that you would prefer to target. The bottom loss is okay normally. It has the ability to be awesome, specifically if you are in a scenario with high shield enemies, especially things like, I'm going to keep going back to Flame Demons because they're the first things that I think of when I think of high shield, low health enemies, because Retaliate 3 is a lot of Retaliate, and it's Retaliate at range 3, which is great. Range 3 is a big range for Retaliate. So this could be a card that allows you to just get a little bit defensive while still dealing some damage. Like, you still have the ability to do a top action, obviously paired with this. So you can kind of pair this with another top action and just expect to be doing damage on your turn and off your turn. However, it's a little limiting because, yes, while 19 is fast for you, there's still a decent number of enemies that can go faster than you. So there's a chance that Retaliate may not be played in time to be able to hit some of the enemies that you are planning to hit. Like Flame Demons do have some single-digit initiative cards. And that Ward Self, yes, it is good. Ward is a great ability, but if you are playing this, then you're probably expecting to be hit by multiple enemies, and in that case, you're only warding, like, you're only reducing the damage from one attack there. So I'd prefer to have this where, like, maybe an ally can get a shield on you, because even just shield 1 could be a significant amount of damage if you're expecting to take attacks from multiple enemies. Our other card is Rock Slide. The top action says create 3 1-hex obstacle tiles in empty hexes within range 3. All allies and enemies adjacent to at least one created tile suffer 1 damage and gain muddle, and you infuse Earth here. The bottom action is a loss that gives you 2 experience, and it says designate 1 enemy within range 4, destroy all obstacles within range 2 of the designated enemy, and perform attack X, targeting the designated enemy and immobilize them, where X is twice the number of destroyed obstacles, and this is at initiative 81. This top action is excellent for opening a room. Even if you are a Cragheart who does not like to be on the front lines, you may become the main room opener with this card, because you can pop open a room and then just go and put obstacles to help determine the path that enemies are going to go, and you're going to slow them coming into the room, buying you time so that you and your allies can get into the room without having to take a bunch of attacks that round. And even if you are about to take some attacks, you are still muddling those enemies, so you're reducing the amount of damage that's coming in. To me, this is where the obstacle generation part of Cragheart really picked up, because I wasn't really using Earthen Bulwark as much. If you are using that card at earlier levels, then you're probably already a little bit more used to some of the obstacle creation. This is going to give you a 3rd obstacle instead of just having 2 obstacles you're creating. But this is just a really, really fun card. Like, as soon as I got this card, I think every time I had to open a door, I was opening it with Cragheart and playing this card in the same turn, because that Earth infusion is also really nice for, again, you are now setting up for your next turn. Cragheart has a really good flow where you have plenty of Earth infusions that you can do, and they're on abilities where you can kind of get into this flow of, okay, a less powerful attack followed by, or a less powerful effect, or maybe just a control effect followed by a powerful attack. There is a really nice natural flow that you can get into with some of these card plays. The bottom loss, like when I first read it, I felt like, oh my gosh, this has the potential to be a very high ceiling, and I think it does. Although, admittedly, I never really hit a great ceiling with it. I think there was maybe one scenario where, like maybe one or two scenarios where I had obstacles already being created as part of the scenario rules. So yeah, there were cases where I could turn this into like an attack 10, attack 12, but it's a little bit more, it requires a little bit more setup than some of the other attacks do. Some of our other losses that we've seen so far. It's nice that if you don't kill the enemy, you get to immobilize it. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fine loss. There are much better losses that I'd rather play. This could just be nice though if you need to clear out a bunch of obstacles in the room. As for which card to pick, if you are melee and you're really sticking to the front lines, Kinetic Assault is probably the way you want to go. Although similar to the last level, if you are melee, I could still see you going either way here because Rock Slide is just a really nice card for being able to generate those obstacles. But really, I think the initiative for Kinetic Assault is really what makes you want to pick it up, especially for the melee Cragheart. For the ranged Cragheart, hell yeah, bring on Rock Slide. Let's start creating those obstacles. You're really going to start being able to manipulate how the enemies move, which is going to lead to damage mitigation for you and your allies, and setting up good AoEs for later turns in the round, or later rounds. At level 5, our first option is Solidify. The top action is an attack 3 at range 4, and if you consume Earth, this becomes an attack 5, gaining experience at range 4. The bottom action is grant one ally within range 3, suffer 1 damage, and shield 2, and this is at initiative 17. This is such a nice card for the ranged Cragheart. Being able to get another sub 20 initiative card is amazing, and both sides of this card are awesome. Obviously, an attack 5 at range 4 is fantastic. We talked about it earlier. It pairs very well with backup ammunition, where you can now do an attack 5 targeting 2 enemies. So I prefer to use this card for the top action, but there were situations where that bottom half was invaluable. Shield 2 for the round is incredible. It's a lot of damage mitigation. If you are not going to be the one to open a door, this is another great ability to play for an ally so that they feel more empowered to go open a door and be prepared for what's on the other side. Our other option is Stone Pummel. This is a top action is an attack 4. And the pattern, I guess, is almost like a TIE fighter or an X-Wing or something like that, where it's you can target up to 4 enemies, but they have to be adjacent to each other. 2 of them have to be adjacent to each other on opposite sides of you. You get to infuse Earth, and the bottom action of this is a persistent loss that says whenever you attack an adjacent enemy, you may destroy one hex obstacle adjacent to both you and that enemy to add +2 to the attack. And this is at initiative 32. I have not played with this card. I think this is a very exciting card for a melee Cragheart to get. I am curious at what point you would want to play it for that loss action, because my instinct is that I would want to play it as quickly as possible, because at this point we're probably creating enough obstacles that you can get pretty consistent use out of that. I say that a little hesitantly because I played the ranged build, so I was creating obstacles left and right. So I'm curious, like, if you didn't take Rock Slide at the last level, I don't know how great your obstacle creation is going to be, but the ability that you get from this of just being able to potentially add +2 to an attack is awesome. However, that top action is great. Like if you can get targeting 2, maybe targeting 3 enemies out of that, that's going to be a non-loss attack 8, non-loss attack 12 that infuses Earth. Hell yeah, buddy. I love that. Like I think you should be able to reliably target 2 enemies with this. 3 enemies is questionable. 4 enemies is pretty dang hard to do, I think. For which card to take, I think this is going to be a pretty clear split between ranged Cragheart is going to be taking Solidify, melee Cragheart is going to be taking Stone Pummel. Pretty easy split there. At level 6, our first option is Cataclysm. The top is a AoE loss that gives you 1 experience by default. It's an attack 4 immobilize. If you consume Earth, it becomes attack 6, and you get an extra experience. and you immobilize all enemies or all allies that are in the red hexes of the attack ability. And the pattern for this is basically the 2 waves of 3 hexes in front of you, so potentially targeting up to 6 hexes. The bottom action is a move 3. If you consume Earth, you get to move 6 total. You get an experience, and then you infuse Earth. And then this is all at initiative 26. There are so many things I love about this card. The initiative is very good. That movement on the bottom is excellent because if you are not ready to just have an attack where you want to be consuming Earth, or if you just have Earth handy, you can easily turn this into a move 6 and then also just re-infuse Earth. Even if it was just a move 3 and you're infusing Earth, that's excellent too. Movements on good initiatives where you're also infusing an element are just very solid for being able to set up for a following round. And that attack ability is so much fun. It is very easy to get at least 3 enemies into that pattern, which is an attack 18. I'm just going to assume you're going to be consuming the Earth for this because hell yeah, you better be consuming Earth for this. It gives you an extra 2 attack. You should absolutely prioritize, if you're going to use this loss, consume the Earth with it. So, and target at least 3 enemies. That's going to give you an attack 18. I've hit this where I have targeted, I think, 5. I don't know if I've ever gotten all 6 enemies in there. But even with targeting 5 enemies, that is attack 6 against 5 enemies. That's 30 damage. Plus, if you have a way to be strengthened for this, like, holy crap, you are... I have like almost cleared rooms with this. This is one of those cards that it is a room-changing card, a scenario-changing card. This is just so much damage. Once again, another card that is a repeatable bottom, or a repeatable action on one side and a very powerful loss on the other side, usually leads to good things that can come from a card. Our other option at level 6 is Dig Pit. The top action of this is push 2, range 1, then create 1 2 damage stun trap in an adjacent empty hex, and then create 1 hex obstacle tile in an empty hex adjacent to the created trap. The bottom action is a heal 3 at range 3, and if you consume Earth, then you get to add an extra target to that, and this is at initiative 88. Thematically, I think this is a fun card. Otherwise, I don't like this card. Even if you're reliably able to get an enemy to just step into that trap that you just created, it's just 2 damage and stun. I mean, that's fine, but it's a lot of work to be able to set up for just stunning an enemy. And in order to make sure that an enemy is going to just walk themselves into that trap, you're kind of blockading off a point where, like, your other allies, if your other allies are melee, they may not be able to get into a good position where they can actually start attacking enemies too. So you may be creating too much of a choke point that is going to hinder your allies. If you're interested in just the path manipulation aspect of it, and you didn't already take Rock Slide at level 4, go back and take that. The bottom action is fine. Potentially doing a heal 6. That's really good for a bottom action of a card. But the initiative is not exciting. We already have plenty of late initiative cards, so we're not seeking that. Honestly, I do not like this card. If you love this card, if you like this card, if you think it's a very valuable card to have, please leave comments below explaining to me how it can be used well. But before I continue that tirade, let me just go into the decision aspect of this. As for which card to take Cataclysm, or go back and take Rock Slide if you didn't already take that at level 4. I just cannot see a world in which I don't know. I would love to understand the argument for taking Dig Pit over Cataclysm here. Just everything about Cataclysm is better. It is better initiative. It has a more repeatable bottom action. Well, that part's maybe a little bit arguable. But I don't know, the top of Dig Pit just kind of sucks to me. There are much better things that you'd rather be doing for your top actions than that action. So take Cataclysm or go back and take an earlier level card. But Cataclysm rocks. At level 7, we have Brutal Momentum. Attack 3, push 2, and then add +1 attack and +1 push for each hex containing an obstacle or wall adjacent to you. The bottom action is a persistent loss that has 4 charges and says, at the start of your next 4 turns, perform move 3, then add +3 attack to your next melee attack this turn, and this is at initiative 37. a nice repeatable top action with a nice loss action on the bottom. Very good. The initiative is kind of mediocre, so hopefully at this point you're able to just replace another like mediocre initiative card in your hand, so it's not really changing your initiative values too much overall. I'm also not positive on how this actually interacts with the bottom of Stone Pummel, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you basically have to choose one of those bonuses to get, because I think if you are choosing to use the bottom of Stone Pummel to destroy an obstacle that's adjacent to both you and an enemy, then you're not going to be getting the bonus from the top of Brutal Momentum. I could be wrong on that, but even if you do not have obstacles handy where you can be just surrounded by your own obstacles, it is nice that the wording for Brutal Momentum says that you can count walls as well. So you could set yourself up here where you are maybe in a doorway or just close to a doorway or something like that, where you're hopefully at least able to get the bonus from this twice and maybe making it an attack 5, push 4. And if you can afford to slap an immobilize on that, well, that's a lot of money you have, but it would be pretty nice. The bottom action, I think the move 3, the free move 3 that you get is fine. Like, it's obviously very good if you have scenarios where you're trying to do a lot of movement. But I think based off of the card selections that you would have been doing for the melee Cragheart at this point, it's not like there's a lot of bottom actions that you have that are non-movement. I'm just trying to go back and look through this really quickly. So I don't know how much that movement is going to be enticing to you. It's a nice addition, but I think the main thing you're playing that for is to be able to get that extra +3 attack to your next melee attack this turn. But I mean, the value of this is basically like move 12, attack 12 over the course of 4 turns. That is very, very good. For our other option, we have Meteor. The top action says, if you consume Earth, whenever you perform a ranged attack this round, all allies and enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage and you gain an experience. Then destroy any number of adjacent obstacles. For each obstacle destroyed, perform attack 2 at range 3. The bottom action is a move 4 jump. All adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage, and this is at initiative 85. For the ranged build, you already have a lot of abilities where you can create obstacles, and so this is where you can really start to capitalize on some of those obstacles you've been creating. You can go in and clean them up and get a bunch of attack 2s out of it. You also get a nice effect similar to Massive Boulder, where you can do some splash damage to adjacent enemies. And one of the nicest things about this is that you can target the same enemy with these attacks. That is really nice, obviously, if you want to focus down a specific enemy, but also for being able to get all of that splash damage on the same enemies around it. It's another nice way of dealing with high shield enemies. This pairs very well with things that add +1 to your attacks. I mean, Cragheart in general is going to benefit from those kinds of items. But I think a fun combination is if you use backup ammunition before you play this card, and you get if you get adjacent to 3 or 4 obstacles, you could basically just use up your entire charge of your entire card of backup ammunition from Meteor alone. Maybe not entirely worth it, because you do have other cards that have more powerful attacks than attack 2, so you probably want to be using backup ammunition for those things, like what was the attack 5 that we got at an earlier level. But it's just something funny to do if you're looking to get a bunch of attacks out in one round. And then a non-loss move with a jump on it. Nothing to complain about there. Very nice. If you're the ranged build, then that all adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage is probably more of a negative, because you are more so going to be landing next to your allies than enemies, most likely. But maybe it could be used to clean up a low health enemy. As for which card to take, if you're leaning into melee attacks, take Brutal Momentum. If you're leaning into ranged attacks, take Meteor. For level 8, our first option is Entomb. The top action is an attack 5, and if you consume Earth, then you create 2 1-hex obstacle tiles in empty hexes adjacent to the target, but not adjacent to you. All allies and enemies adjacent to at least 1 created tile suffer 1 damage, and you gain an experience. Then the bottom action is move 3, then create 1 1-hex obstacle tile in an adjacent empty hex, and then destroy any number of obstacles within range 3. For each obstacle destroyed, give ward to 1 ally adjacent to the hex that the obstacle occupied. This is at initiative 23. The top action is a very welcome thing for the melee Cragheart, because you just have not had as many cards that you've been using for obstacle generation. So Entomb does give you that, without having to sacrifice an entire action to just generating obstacles. It is written in a way that you can't immediately benefit from, what's it called? That persistent loss card that would allow you to destroy the obstacle to get some extra attack, but you could still benefit from it the following round by just kind of shifting yourself around that enemy you just attacked and then destroying one of those obstacles from Entomb. And now you've just had a couple of rounds where you've dealt a lot of damage to one target. The bottom action does also give you some obstacle creation as well. So if you're not using it for that top action, you know, I could see you pair this as the bottom action with another powerful attack from another card, because it is early initiative, so it does give you that ability to play some of your other powerful cards that have top actions at a faster turn. And you potentially get some defensive capabilities with being able to give allies ward. It is a little unfortunate that you can't give yourself ward from this. I don't think that would like break this card by any means if that was allowed. So just one thing that I wish was a little different, but I have not played with this card, so just take my comments on it with a grain of salt. But I think the obstacle generation you're getting from this is a very welcome thing for the melee Cragheart. Our other option is Rocky End. The top action is a loss. It is an AoE attack where you can attack in 2 hexes in front of you and then the 3 hexes behind that. And it's attack 5, Muddle, then heal 5, targeting all allies in the red hexes of the attack ability. And then if you consume Earth, you create 1 hex obstacle tiles in each empty red hex of the attack ability. You can get up to 2 experience total from this action. The bottom action is a push 2, range 3, immobilize, and then create 1 hex obstacle tile in each featureless hex the target exits with the push. So another card where we're getting some obstacle generation. Obviously half of this is a lost side, which can give us a lot of obstacle generation at once, but is not going to be a consistent obstacle generator throughout the scenario. It's not as strong of an attack as Cataclysm that we saw a couple levels ago, but it does give Muddle and healing, so there's more versatility there. I think the Cragheart that's most likely to be taking this to is going to be a ranged Cragheart, which means those first 2 red hexes in front of you are probably going to be some allies, so you could potentially get like maybe, I'm sure you get like heal 10, attack 10 out of this. That's a pretty great value. And then that bottom action of a push 2 at range 3 and immobilize is something that it's a repeatable action. Your melee friends are going to really enjoy that. You can just kind of push an enemy away from them, get some damage mitigation, although you just want to make sure you're not pushing an enemy away that they were planning on attacking. As for which card to take, melee Craghearts should take Entomb because you're going to get an attack that allows you to also generate some obstacles out of it. I could see melee Craghearts wanting to take Rocky End because you can still generate obstacles reliably with the bottom of Rocky End. But I think I still lean towards Entomb, just even for the slightly better initiative. Ranged Craghearts will take Rocky End because that top loss is good, but then the bottom action is a nice, interesting thing to do to give some support to your allies. Finally, at level 9, we have Earth's Embrace as our first option. The top action is an attack 3, target all adjacent enemies, push 2. Then you may push the targets into hexes containing obstacles. In each case, destroy the obstacle, the target suffers 2 damage, and you gain 1 experience. The bottom action says at the end of each of your turns, this is a persistent loss. At the end of each of your turns, perform heal X self, where X is the number of adjacent obstacles, and this is at initiative 52. The top action is literally just a supercharged version of Heaving Swing, which is already a pretty good action, but being able to target all adjacent enemies and having it push 2 instead of push 1 by default is really, really good. This is obviously going to be a very big payoff for having a bunch of obstacles around, because then you can get a bunch of extra direct damage from it. And then also if you're getting towards the middle or end of a scenario and you decide, I don't really need that extra attack from Earth's Embrace, I need some healing, I need to be ready to be taking a lot of damage from enemies, the bottom action is awesome for getting a lot of health. Though obviously keep in mind that something like a scenario with a lot of enemies that poison can kind of nerf that ability. Your other option is Wave of Destruction. The top action is an attack 1, in a wave pattern that can target up to 6 hexes away from you, alternating between like 2 hex, 1 hex, 2 hex, 1 hex, 2 hex, 1 hex. For each target, add plus X to the attack, where X is the range to that target. So for example, on the furthest target, it would be an attack 7. And the bottom action is move 5. You may enter hexes containing obstacles with this movement. When you do, destroy the obstacle, and then add plus X to your next attack this turn, where X is twice the number of obstacles destroyed with the move ability. I know that this is a level 9 card, but it is still crazy to me that that top action is not lost. I don't think it's going to be hard to get at least 15 attack out of that. I could see it, especially if you're in a party of 4, easily getting more than that. It is just an absolutely insane AoE. The bottom action is also something I can use to like supercharge a single attack. I mean, even with that top action, you can still get an attack 7 on an enemy. But if you really need to supercharge an attack, maybe you're able to use that bottom movement to destroy like 3 obstacles, which is going to allow you to add 6, maybe 8 damage to an attack. It doesn't say it has to be a melee attack either. It can be a ranged attack. So it's just wild. The damage output from this card is great on both sides. As for which card to take, it's level 9. Take whatever the hell card you want. If it were me, I think I'd be taking Wave of Destruction just because I think that's going to be more consistent. I also think that just because Earth's Embrace is, yes, it is a very souped up version of Heaving Swing from level 1, but it's not something totally unique. Whereas the top action from Wave of Destruction is just a crazy AoE pattern. And I really like the idea of trying to find like ways to move through a bunch of obstacles to supercharge one attack. Like Wave of Destruction just feels like the more exciting card for me to take. So that's probably the one that I would go with. And now for perks. Generally, the first perks that I would recommend are going to be these ones that replace these negative modifiers with neutral or positive modifiers. Especially for the ranged Cragheart build where you have some of these AoEs that are going to be doing a little bit less damage. Removing these negative modifiers is going to be beneficial because in some cases these negative modifiers could make you do 0 damage, which just really is a pretty crappy feeling. After that, I'd start looking at these perks for ignoring scenario effects and then ignoring item -1 effects. The item -1 effects is important if you're the melee Cragheart. You don't really need to worry about this one if you're the ranged Cragheart, but a lot of those good defensive items that give you shield are going to be putting negative modifiers in your deck. So being able to ignore those negative modifiers really unlocks some of those better defensive items for you. Meanwhile, the ignore scenario effects and add a rolling muddle card. To me, it's kind of like an Eat Your Vegetables perk. Like, it's not always going to be that beneficial to you because you're not always going to have scenarios that have negative scenario effects. But having that rolling muddle card is nice for all builds. I mean, it's rolling, so it's generally not going to affect your modifier draws. I mean, obviously, advantage and disadvantage kind of put some edge cases in there with that, but it's a rolling modifier card, so it's almost like a half free draw to me. I don't know, there's probably a better way of describing it. From there, I think it's kind of up to you. I'll just kind of run through some of the perks and why you might take them. I'd probably just generally recommend going for these replace a +0 with a +1, create a 1 hex obstacle tile. This is very nice because it's replacing some of these neutral modifier cards, which ones that not only add an extra damage, but they are rolling, they help you to create obstacles. The ranged build is going to be generally doing more multi-targeted attacks, so the ranged build is going to be getting more of these obstacles. But I would say the melee build is going to benefit from them a bit more because you have fewer cards that you are going to be using to directly create obstacles. And so you can get a lot more benefit out of just being able to randomly create some of these obstacles that could pop up for you. Replace +0 with 2 +1 push cards. This is fine. I think I would probably deprioritize this one a bit just because the random push, it can be useful, it may not be useful, but there are other more impactful ability attack modifier cards that I'd rather be drawing. And so these ones where it's like replacing a card with 2 of another card that aren't rolling, I don't always love them, but again, it is still replacing neutral cards with more damage dealing cards. And that push has potential to be damage mitigation as well. I guess another draw for this, if you are the melee build, you may benefit from some of this push from something like Heaving Swing, where you get more damage for pushing an enemy into obstacles, and so this could help you to get even more push on that. Add 1 +2 Immobilize card. This is going to be very good for the range build because this can keep some melee enemies off of your allies. And obviously it's dealing a lot more damage. Adding +2 to some of your smaller attacks is very good value. And you're going to be drawing more modifier cards anyway, so you are more likely to be drawing these. Next, we'll go down to once each scenario. During your turn, you may destroy one hex obstacle within range 5 to teleport to the hex it occupied. This, I think, can be very good for a Cragheart that is ranged, but also doing a lot of support, where a lot of those heals are coming from the support, so maybe you're doing moves less frequently. So this ends up potentially being a free teleport 5, which teleport is incredibly strong. It's a little bit weaker than a normal teleport because in this case you do have to have line of sight because it is range 5, so you do still need to be able to see where you're teleporting to. I imagine that this perk is kind of, it's maybe not that exciting to look at it and say like, oh, I really want this one. But then once you have it, I could see it being like every scenario, you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had this perk. So I don't think I ended up taking it, but I can see the value in it. You just end up getting, you don't start off with a lot of movement with Cragheart, but you do get movement over time. Next up, we have at the end of each of your rests, you may destroy one hex obstacle within range 3 to infuse Earth. This is an excellent perk. This is really nice to be able to come out of a rest cycle, like a long rest, and just being able to have Earth ready for the next round. For the ranged Cragheart, it's maybe a little bit less important once you get to level 4 and you have Rock Slide, because the way that I see this perk being used the most is you are going to use it after a long rest because you want to infuse Earth, you're getting ready to go into a new room. The ranged Cragheart is often going to be, or if you have Rock Slide, just the level 4 card Rock Slide in general, you're probably going to be playing that as a room opener anyway, which does not require Earth and it does infuse Earth. However, if you're not opening the room with that card and you're trying to do some more damage immediately, that's when the Earth is really valuable to have coming out of that rest, mainly a long rest. Or in cases where an ally may be able to help you play additional cards, aka Satha. She was in my party. I mean, her paired with Cragheart was such an incredible combination, but her being paired with Cragheart is where I really saw the value from this perk, because even though I was often playing Rock Slide as my first card going into a room, having that Earth available basically let me kind of like use Cragheart in multiple ways where he could be doing damage and Rock Slide. But obviously those kinds of combinations are very dependent on your party composition. Lastly, we have whenever a new room is revealed, control all enemies in the newly revealed room. Move 1. This movement must end in an empty hex, meaning you cannot just move those enemies into a trap. I didn't take this perk until very late, and I think even after I took it, I don't know that I actually remembered to use it. And this is something where I think I could see a lot of value in this. Coming into a new room, you were at a severe deficit of information. Maybe you planned to just, like, Cragheart is, I think, going to be very commonly a room opener. And actually, I guess this perk doesn't even require that he's the one to open the room. It just has to be somebody opening the room. But coming into a new room, you're at a deficit of information because you've picked your cards not knowing what's going to be in that room. And so this just gives you, it helps to cut that disadvantage that you're at. Maybe you need to organize some of those enemies into a pattern that you were trying to use for an AoE for either you or an ally. Maybe you just have all the enemies move backwards one, so they're less likely to be able to attack you. Maybe you're moving them into, oh no, I was going to say hazardous terrain, but you can't actually do that with this. But maybe you're moving them out of the way so that you can play something like Rock Slide and actually be able to cut them off. Like maybe the default position that the enemies are in prevents you from putting your rocks in a good place, and this actually opens up those spaces for you. So I think that this gives you a lot of versatility. And so I think if I had to personally go back and do it, I think after I did the 3 replace 1 + 0 with 1 + 1, create 1 hex obstacle, blah, 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 I think I would actually go back and take this perk right after that because of just how, just honestly how unique this perk is. It's a very fun perk, and I'm a little disappointed that I didn't take it earlier. For our masteries, we have in a single scenario, create, destroy, or move at least one obstacle tile each round. Then we also have in a single scenario, heal 8 or more hit points during a single round, deal 8 or more damage with a ranged attack ability, and deal 8 or more damage with a melee attack ability. These are both rather difficult. I don't even think you can do the first one at level 1. You just don't have enough cards that create, destroy, manipulate obstacles. Like maybe if you're playing a very short scenario and you're just resting constantly so you can get those few cards back, you could do it. But that is going to really make you not effective to play. And the second one is also tough. I'm actually interested. I think I did this one pretty early on with Cragheart. Maybe it was my second or third scenario. I have to go back and look to see how I did this one, just to make sure I didn't play it that it was like deal 8 or more damage with a ranged attack action. Like, did I actually follow the rules with doing it with the ability? But it is tough. At lower levels, you have pretty bad modifiers. So even with Strengthen, you're just kind of at least hoping for like a neutral modifier. I do like the Mastery in terms of what it's trying to get you to do is just show that you can have that versatility with Cragheart, but it's a lot. It is asking a lot. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I take this back. It's not as hard as I was making it out to be, because it is still just an attack ability. So an attack ability can still consist of multiple attacks. So yeah, I apologize. Getting my own thoughts mixed up here. I need to go to the gym or something, get my brain juices going. But if you are trying to focus on a mastery, like I've mentioned before in other videos, I usually try to do one mastery early with my class, and then I kind of just forget about doing the second mastery. So in Cragheart's case, I would advocate for doing that second mastery. You can do it fairly early on. And doing it early on, especially if you are not planning to be support later on, do it before you want to start cutting those heals out of your hand. Now we are going to take a look at the solo scenario item, so if you do not want spoilers for that, then skip ahead. But the solo scenario item is Stone Charm. It is a single hand item that can exhaust and be unexhausted during long rest. During your turn, perform your next attack or heal ability this turn as if you occupied the same hex as any obstacle and infuse earth. This is an incredibly powerful solo item. It is a very hard solo scenario. Like, this is one of the harder solo scenarios that I did. I think even in my playthrough of it, I barely won it, and I think I still used a stamina potion incorrectly, where I think I used it to recover a higher level card. So there's a chance that if I did not do that, I would have had to redo the scenario. But it's difficult. But the payoff for this one is definitely worth it. It is a little similar to that perk that allows you to teleport by destroying an obstacle, but this is safer because you don't have to potentially be amidst a bunch of enemies, but you still get the benefit of being able to do some of your massive AoEs among a bunch of enemies. So, you know, I'm trying to pull out some of these cards. Just a few examples here. Like, you throw out any of these AoEs, and now suddenly if you're able to get better positioning, by being able to pretend like you are in the same hex as an obstacle, like all of those AoEs can be easier to do in some cases, especially if you're trying to use them to get enemies in the back line. The item is in general better for the melee Cragheart, but honestly, because I took some of these cards that aren't really quote unquote for the ranged Cragheart, like I took Cataclysm because I really like just the initiative and that movement. Stone Charm helped me to be able to optimize this AoE even when I wasn't trying to get into melee range. And then as icing on the cake, it's just reinfusing earth for your next turn. Like, you're probably using this for a powerful attack that's going to be consuming earth, and guess what? You can set up for your next turn as well. I love this item. So that'll wrap it up for this Cragheart guide. Yeah, just to summarize, he's a very versatile class, especially early on, where he's going to be doing a lot of control, where you can be placing a lot of obstacles to manipulate enemies. You can do melee attacks, you can do ranged attacks. You probably want to specialize as you level up and going into either melee or ranged, but there are absolutely builds that you can do where you can be a mix of both. You can also keep to somewhat of a support role as well. While you're dealing out some damage, you're healing your allies. But the thing that I will reiterate is that if you are going to play Cragheart, you really need to understand monster movement rules so that you can really optimize your obstacle placement. You're trying to put obstacles in a way that helps you benefit for your other abilities that depend on using those obstacles, as well as just trying to manipulate how the enemies behave and trying to mitigate damage because you're trying to prevent them from having a valid path to get to you, or extending the path that it takes for them to get to you. And on top of all that, Cragheart can do a ton of damage. You get some crazy powerful loss abilities. So I'll wrap it up there. I love Cragheart. I think he's a very fun class. I remember the very first time I played him in first edition, I didn't enjoy him. And I think that's just because I just didn't understand how to play him. But he is a very fun, very powerful class. I hope this guide was helpful to you. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care.